Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein here in the Yeshiva Shalmaila. And this week we have a fascinating program. It's going to be talking about the minig that they have, or the takana that the Sephardim have, not to accept a Giyur into their communities because of the fear of intermarriage. And this is something which is surprising because it goes neged, the 36 times that the Torah is mazir and ahavas Hager, and the opposite of being Mitzayir Hager. And I don't believe it's ever been spoken about Barabim before. And we have three guests. We have the world expert on Geiris, according to some opinions, is Geirim Nochum Eisenstein. He's the Rosh of the HaRabbonim L'Nyadei Geiris that was founded, he was appointed by Rabbi Yashiv, and he's a world expert on Geiris. He's also going to be a little bit speaking about the Hafka'as Kiddushin that happened in Haifa. He's going to be speaking about that, but that's not the main focus. We also have the honor of having with us Rabbi Yitzhak Dweck. He was the rabbi of Deal for 33 years. Today he's a Rosh Kollel. Rabbi Vadia, Chacham Vadia, the Rishon LeTzion, the great Geirim, used to sleep by him, I think, for 17 years. Every time he came to America, he stayed by him. And this is the first time, I believe, that this topic is being addressed by a Rav of the Kehillah of the Syrian. So this is really a first time for us. And then we will have a rabbi from Mexico, and I think this is the first time we've had somebody on from Mexico. So we have North America, we have Mexico, and we have Israel this time. Rabbi Yitzhak Fuchs, I think he was Megayer personally over 70 people, and he does not believe in this takana that the Sephardim made in us. He's doing it mostly in a Sephardic community. And by the way, when I say the Sephardim, it's the Sephardim really in the Syrian community in North America and Argentina. It's not necessarily worldwide. So this is a very fascinating program. Before we start, I do want to say a short thought. On this week's Parsha is the Parah Aduma, and we listen to it. We wonder, why are they telling us stuff that happened 3,500 years ago? We don't have a Parah Aduma today. Let's hear the story of the Parah Aduma. It's this red heifer, and it's strange. There were very few in the whole world of it. And if it had even 2 black hairs, it wasn't kosher. So it's this magnificent red creature, really rare. Asher ein ba mum. Not only was it rare, it had to be a perfect one. If it had a scar in its eyelash, it was no good. Asher le'ala aleha oil. It was in its full life. It wasn't broken by labor. It had never pulled a plow before. It's just a magnificent creature, like from a storybook. And it gets destroyed. V'saraf es hapara, and you retire with mayim chayim el keli. So let me give you my read on it. And like I always say, this is one person's read in the Torah. But I think the Parah Aduma is very relevant to me and to you. Because what is it? I've had a Parah Aduma. What does that mean? Something beautiful. It was a dream, an aspiration, some idea that I had, some hope that I would accomplish. And you know what happened? And it gets shattered. It gets destroyed. And dreams die. Dreams do die. But what does the Torah tell us? That the Parah Aduma is the source of cleansing, of holiness, of tahara. And how is that? So let me tell you a few things. In Japan, there's something called kintsugi. And what is it? In the Western world, when a dish breaks, something beautiful, everybody's, oh my goodness, you broke that dish, that beautiful. You know what they do in Japan? There's an old minig. They take this type of a lacquer, it's like a cement, but it's made out of gold and platinum, very expensive, and they put it into the cracks and they rejoin the clay. And this plate now has all this veining and this marbling of the gold, and it becomes something exquisite and special. And the Japanese say that it's even stronger at the place of the breakage. It's not unlike a pearl. Do you know how a pearl is formed? When you have this shellfish underwater, and what happens? There's always the fish. This is what they eat. Some fish attacks it. Or maybe it gets battered by an ocean current against a boulder, and it develops a crack. So the tiny muscle inside, this little organism inside, goes ahead, and to block up that crack, it starts creating a pearl. And the pearl is used as the blockage for that hole, for that water that is threatening to invade it. So it is only the cracked shellfish that creates a pearl. And it creates that incredible, beautiful pearl at the place of the breakage. So let me share with you a story. There's a famous doctor in America. Her name is Beryl Bene Saref. And she's actually Sephardi. I believe her father came from Morocco. And her father was a very famous mathematician. He actually became a Nobel laureate. And he very much wanted his daughter to get into a good school. But she was dyslexic. She had real issues. She inverted letters, and she couldn't read properly. Her father used pull, and he sent her to Harvard. Who's going to say no to a Nobel laureate? And she said school was horrible. To Harvard Medical. She went to college. She went to Harvard Medical. And she said in her last year of Harvard Medical, they started doing imaging, and she was last in her class. And when they started doing the imaging, they brought up like an ultrasound or an X-ray, and everybody's looking at it. And she said to the professor, I see a mass over there. And the professor of radiology said, what mass? And she said, look. And with her finger, she found in the radiology, in the X-ray, a mass. And the professor said, in 30 years, I've never had somebody with this talent. And they brought other images to her. And today, she is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Radiology. And she's a worldwide professor. She's discovered new methods from ultrasound, X-ray, MRI, etc., to find masses, diseases. A child in vitro, in the womb, she can tell what the health of the child be post-birth. And she said, because I was dyslexic, I never communicated with words. I always see the world through images. And she said, if I hadn't been dyslexic, I was not be able to have all these cures. So what does that mean? In the place of the breakage, that's where the pearl is formed, the precious, beautiful pearl. That's where it becomes stronger. Did you ever hear, when I was growing up, there was a Yankee player, his name was Kevin Maas. And Kevin Maas was the Yankees brought up, I don't remember, this was probably in the 80s, they brought him up, and he hit more home runs in his first 100 at-bats than Babe Ruth did. They thought he would be the next Babe Ruth. He could hit a fastball that was 90 miles, 95 miles. They threw him 100 miles. He hit it out of the park. They thought he was unbelievable. And then after 100 at-bats, some pitcher threw him a curveball. And he swung it, and he missed like by a country mile. And then the pitchers realized, this guy can hit anything straight. As fast and straight as it is, boom, it's going. You throw him a curveball. Oh, my goodness, did he look silly. I think today he's an insurance salesman, a lovely person. I think he sells insurance to some company. It didn't last very long. And you know what? The Torah tells us life is like that. Could you hit a fastball? You know what? A lot of people can hit something straight. What happens when life throws you a curveball? Are you able to hit that too? So the Torah tells us something beautiful. You had a parah aduma, something majestic, a dream, a vision, and it was a tragedy, something sad. You know what? Can you take those ashes and be mitzarefit with mayim chayim and find something live in that loss and turn it into the source of Tahara? That could be Matai or anything. If you could take those ashes and combine them with Mayim Chaim, with the source of life, see, how do we move past it? How do we take something out of it? How do we form a pearl here? How do we see past the curveball? Then we have Tahara forever. That is the source of Tahara for life. You know that the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos in Parah Paragimel writes that when they were matayr the Parah, when they wanted to, the Kohen Gadol used to do the Mayim by Yom Kippur. They would be matayr the Kohen Gadol. He says they would always be matama the person beforehand, and then they would be maz on him, the person who brought the water up, because the person who delivered the water to the Kohen Gadol had to be extra toyer. And the Lashon Rambam writes, somebody who was tamei first And this is the exact lashon. Ze asher hu zalav, the person that was tamei and then become tahor, yoiser gadol hamadrega b'tahara. His madrega of tahara is so much stronger than the person who always had the fastball. The person who had that setback and creates that pearl, puts the gold back into the dish, that's the person who's much stronger. How do we come to tahara? If we can turn our ashes through the Mayim Chaim into something that makes us that much stronger. That's the side. That's a possible pshat in the Efer Parah. Before we go to our guest, I would like to point out something on a halachic basis. 36 times the Torah talks about a ger. Vihavtem es a ger. V'ger lo yisane. Geirim hayisim be'eretz b'tzrayim. Don't afflict the ger. It would seem to me as an outsider that a takana against Geirim, there is no mitzvah in the Torah that's more than Geirim. Tchiras Mitzrayim is more. It's the only one. It's 50. This is 36. But as a mitzvah, positive. So the answer is, so there's a tshuva from the Mishpatei Uziel. It was a big Sephardish gadol, a Rav in Yisroel. I think he was a Rav of Rosh. Whatever, it was a big goyin. And Rabbi Uziel writes, because it's Eis Laseis Lashem Heiferu Teresecha. He says intermarriage is such a scourge in America that it's Eis Laseis Lashem. It's so insidious, right? So here's what's interesting. I looked a lot about the concept of Eis Laseis, and we do use it l'halacha. We would not have written down Torah Shebal Peh were it not for Eis Laseis Lashem Heiferu Teresecha. So we would not have Gemara, Bavli, Yerushalayim, Sifra. It's an Issa Daraisa. But what do we do it? The Gemara says, the Gemara in Bavli, in Tzmura, on Daf Yudal, it says, because Eis Lasis Hashem, they were matter the Isra of Ksayvlucha es Advara Me'ela. Because the Torah would be Mishtakach. The Gemara additionally says, the reason why you're allowed to say Shalom Aleichem, the Gemara in Bracha says, how could you use Hashem's name? Also, Eis Lasis Hashem. These are individual. The Rambam writes it by Nitan ala Shifcha, they were matir by Eis Lasis Hashem. Dachiezer brings it. Ramosha Feinstein writes the whole heter for Kollel is because Eis Lasis Hashem, according to the Rambam, that you're not allowed to be a makabel stucker to learn. The Rambam, the Ramosha writes is Eis Lasis Hashem. But what was a chiddush to me is those are individual, isurim. This is 36 times in the Torah. And what does he say? He says, Eis Lasis Hashem, they allowed to be oiker, one of the Ikrei Hadas, because of Eis Lasis Hashem, Heiferu Teresecha. So it's quite astonishing. And listen to how these HaRabbonim speak about it. Nochum Eisenstein is going to have a different view of how they will matter it. I think it's fascinating. Before we go to our guests, here's our 2 riddles for the week. And this riddle, this is what kasha bothers me every single year. What does it say? It says, Yan lohem mantendi, right? Moshe and Aaron were punished. They didn't enter into Eretz Yisroel, Hagdisheni, because they hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. The question is, every year, twice a year, we have tefillah, or once a year, we have tefillah Geshem. And we say, B'schos of Avram, who said, Yukach na ma'at mayim, B'schos Yitzchok, B'schos Yaakov, etc., right? What's the schos of Moshe? Because al hasel lahach v'yotzu mayim. That he hit the rock and mayim came out. Hello? Al hasel lahach v'yotzu mayim is the reason he didn't go into Eretz Yisrael. Pella de Kishayla. That's riddle number 1. And riddle number 2, this I'm stealing from the great Rashash, and it's the Giyur to the Parsha. It says, what did they do with the Mei Parah after they spritzed? They squirted water on the Tameh. It said the water would run. It would run through the Zara would be covered in it. So the Mishnah says in Parah Perik Yud Beis Mishnah Daled that Mechatash Asu Mitzvasan, there used to be dairis on it, V'loinim Nan. They didn't care. That's it. It was used. It did its mitzvah. The person is tired. Done. Finished. Pella is, in fact, the Rashash, the halacha is, the Shulchan Aruch says, in Siman Tafresh Samach Dalad Sivkatan Ches, that what's the halacha? What do you do with a Haishana and a Rava after you use it for the lulav? Are you allowed to step on it? Chas v'shalom, what's the lashon of the matter? Afal Pish and Israel Ein Lifsaya Alav. right? And the Ramah says, Bechutei Tzitzis, the same thing. Afl acher shenifsiku ein linig bohen minig dezayin lezarka b'makim beguna. Same thing by Tzitzis in Siman Chaf Aleph in Shulchan Aruch, right? And the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Tafrei Shlamet Ches says, after Sukkot, you're not allowed to step on Atziyah Sukkah. All Tashmishay Mitzvah, you're not supposed to be Mavaza afterwards. Why is May Parah different? Those are our two riddles. At the end of the program, we will have the winner of next week. Now, we often have more than one winner, so we do a raffle. We decide which winner we're going to play. So don't think just because you weren't played, you probably were right to. We just didn't play. Sometimes we get many respondents, so we only play again. The one who's the raffle winner, if it's only one, we play that one. So let's go to our wonderful program.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from Yerushalayim, the Geirim Nochum Eisenstein. He's the head of the HaRabbonim, L'umi Binyane Giyur, Misaydei Shel Reb Chaim Kreisworth. He was put on it by Rabbi Yashiv Zichron Levracha. He's also the Rav of Maalot Dafna. He's also learned for many years in the Mir. When I was there, welcome, Reb Nochum.
Shalom Aleichem to Yedidi Reb David and all the listeners.
So, Reb Nochum, the Sephardic community in America has something, they call it the edict, the takana, which is where they do not allow any individual, male or female, who has married a ger, nor them, nor their children, into the community. It's almost like the Geirim in Shin Lamed Dalet. It doesn't say they don't sit in their Daladamas, but they don't admit into their schools, into their shuls. They don't give them an aliyah. They won't go to their simchas. They basically cut them off. And is no greater personage than Reb Avadia Yosef, Zechat Tzaddik Levracha, the great Dayan and Paisik and Rabbi Rashi, flew to America to importune on behalf of a Giyur, so he was Megayer, and they said no to him. And they say that because of that, the intermarriage in the Sephardi community is less than 1%. It's basically zero, vis-a-vis the America as a whole, where the intermarriage is 50%. So my question is to you, as certainly one of the world's expert on Geirus. What do you know about this? Do you hold of this psak, etc.?
First off, not only in America, in South America, many kilas have a moratorium on doing Geirus. Not necessarily that they won't allow a ger to be part of their community, but they have a moratorium on doing Geirus in Argentina, in Brazil, and other South American countries, which was done for the same purpose as the Sephardic communities in New York. It's not necessarily all the Sephardic communities. There are Sephardic communities that do Geirus and accept Geirus, but it's the Syrian community which is very strong about this takana ad kedei kach, that they, like you mentioned, they won't even let him into the kehila. It was done because of intermarriage. They saw there was a lot of problems, and every kehila has the right to make takanas, which might be over and above what the halacha requires, for the simple purpose of being mechazik the kehila. And it's a very good thing, because like you mentioned yourself, that the intermarriage rate in their kehila is almost zero. It's very, very low. So it's a good thing, and every kehila has to decide what is good for the kehila. If there would be more strong kehilas like some of the Sephardic kehilas in America, which would make similar takanas, either moratoriums or not allow the Geirim to be part of the kehila, it would solve a lot of the problems of the Geirus which is going on in the world. I'm talking about Orthodox Geirus. I'm not even talking about conservative Geirus. I'm talking about so-called Orthodox Geirus that unfortunately, most of the Geirus which was done on the so-called Orthodox auspices do not meet the minimum requirements of the halacha. And when these people do such a conversion and they get a certificate from an Orthodox rabbi or the Orthodox based in, it's tantamount to giving intermarriage a hechsher.
So, Nochum, let me ask you a question, and this is what I'm struggling with. It says, in one form or another, 36 times in the Torah, It talks about Ahavas Hager, and it talks about, on the contrary, being Mitzayer Hager. So if you have somebody who is Megayer Kahalacha, and it's a grueling process, they will not accept him. And my question is, why aren't you being over the Issa Daraisa of being Mitzayer Hager?
You're not being Mitzayer here for a simple reason, because as you, as an Ashkenazi, if you'd want to become a member of the Syrian community, they wouldn't accept you either. So they have takonas who they accept and who don't accept them. In these Geirim, which we're talking about, I assume that the good Geirim, which is a very small amount, they should go find a different keeler that will accept them. Every keeler has their takonas who they accept from members. Shuls also have takonas who they accept from members, who they don't accept from members, and just like they might not accept me or you because they don't like the color of our skin. So there's other criteria which every kehila has the right to make in order to be mechazik the kehila. So they let them go. They did a geiris. They knew they wouldn't be accepted into this kehila, so they should go to a different kehila which will accept them.
So let me ask you a question, Nochum. If I was a ger, and I did a sincere geiris, whatever, and I'm a ger, and I come to a shul, and they say, listen, we don't like Geirim. That's how we don't want Geirim. What could there be a bigger sinas hager than to say we don't like Geirim? I can't imagine a bigger sinner. I can't imagine a bigger saying. Yes, you have a right to say, a country club has a right to say we don't accept you if you're blue, Jewish, or black. We don't accept Geirim. Isn't that exactly what the Torah is coming to warn about?
No, so let me know I'm a Jew, and a Jew who will answer the question by throwing you back and asking another question.
Yeah.
That this kehilas, that me or you would want to go to a certain shul, and the shul will not accept our membership for whatever the reason is. We don't meet the criteria of their takana, so there's no halacha of sinas Yehudi also. If you're calling the Sina Torah the Ger, so maybe the Torah mentions the halach of a Vihavtem as a Ger more times than it does, but there's halach of a Vihavtem as a Kamocha, there's halach of every Jew we have to love. So according to you, this is discrimination against regular Jews also. So why did you ask me that question?
So let me respond in two ways. And I won't answer with a question. I'll respond with an answer. I think that something that is hira 36 times obviously has a particular chayim. We know that there are isurim like a rayas, avodah zarah, shichas dam that are more chamer. This is the most oft mentioned isur in the entire Torah. So certainly we have to look at it with a special chayim there. And second of all, that if a guy says we don't want people who eat too much, right? We don't want people who don't learn. Everybody has the ability to eat less, to learn more, to wear a certain color shirt, etc. If somebody's a ger, there's nothing he could do about it. So you're not discriminating randomly. You're saying, we don't like you because of what you are. So this is not a voluntary thing. The community that doesn't accept you, they say we don't accept Mizrahi. Become Haredi. Okay, very Haredi. Again, so it's not against you. It's against some attribute that you are choosing. When somebody's don't become we're only Hasidish. Put on a shtreimel, go to the mikvah on Shabbos, and we will accept you. If somebody says we don't like you because of who you are, and there's nothing that you could do to change, that is sin. That is sinas Yisroel, and I would say you're over the isav leisisnas achicha, and you're over the isav haftler akabecha. The ger can do nothing. He can't put on a shtreimel. He can't put on a bekisha. He can't put on a gartel. He can't change to the yeshiva. He can't learn Reb Chaim. There's nothing he could do. This is exactly what the Torah is talking about.
So don't lower it to a personal level. These kehilas which don't accept Geirim, they don't hate the Geirim, they have nothing against the Geirim, they have to punish in their kehila not to accept a person who is a ger. The ger who does the geiris knows this. He knows this when he does the geiris that X, Y, and Z kehila will not accept him. It's nothing personal. It's absolutely nothing personal. It's part of a takana. It's part of a takana that they have for whatever the reason is. There's nothing personal that they hate these people. It's a takana that the membership in their kehila, they have certain criteria, and these people as a group as a group are not accepted in their kehillah, but no one hates them. No one hates them. It's not
I don't know what hates them, but it discriminates. Can I ask you a question, Nochum? Would you feel that if a community said no Jews allowed in our neighborhood, right? We for 1,000 years would scream anti-Semitism, and they would say, look, it's nothing personal. We don't hate you. We don't want Jews. L'toivas, our kehillah of Geirim, we don't want Jews. Is that anti-Semitism or not?
It's anti-Semitism because they have to show a reason why they don't want the Jews coming.
We don't want it. We don't want it. Just like you don't want the Geirim, we don't want the Jews.
They have a very strong reason to preserve their kehillah. They have to make a loy plug. It's a loy plug which was done al das the HaRabbonim from Doris, and it has nothing to do with discrimination. That they put up a sign, we don't want Jews in the neighborhood. Because obviously, why don't you want the Jews? Here there's a takana. The takana is a loy plug. It's not on a personal level that they hate the Geirim. They do not hate Geirim, but in their kehillah they have to keep their kehillah strong, and they have requirements with their members, which members they accept, which members they don't accept it. But it's absolutely nothing is being done on a personal level against these against a righteous ger, let's call him.
Well, it's not being done personal unless you're that ger who wants to come in, who's married to a Sephardi, who can't go to family simchas. Then it becomes very personal.
That's something else. That's something else. The family simcha, they want to come, they're invited, but they can't.
No. They won't. They don't invite them to.
Ask them that question. Why are you asking me that question? They're making these takonas which they feel it's necessary.
No, I was wondering if you could say that it's a gather of Eis Lasis Lashem, that they said Einachinami, it's an Isser in the Torah, but we have to preserve our community, and it's Eis Lasis Lashem.
It's Sheval Taisa. They're not community. We don't accept a membership from a person of the ger, just like they probably have other criteria also. They won't let you in either. They won't let you in, and they won't let me in.
I understand.
So why are we worse than the Geirim that they won't let us in?
Well, we don't particularly want to get in. That's one of them. But if you had somebody in Ashkenazi,
we want to get in. Let's say I live in the neighborhood there, and I like to show the way they daven over there. That's
I don't know. I don't know. Is that true? I don't know. Is that true that they won't let you in? I don't know that. I don't know that.
I'm sure they won't let me in. If you don't have Syrian blood, they won't let you in. They want to keep their kehillah a closed, preserved kehillah, and they've been very successful in doing that.
Nochum, do you think yeshivas that don't accept a certain type of bachram from a certain background, do you think that is sinas Yisroel or not?
No, because also the yeshiva does it because they do it in order to be mechazik the yeshiva. The yeshiva has certain rules who they accept, and they feel that you go to certain chadarim, they have criteria who the parents are and what the parents do, and they want to preserve a certain type of atmosphere in the school, a certain type of shkof in the school. So they make that condensmice of which parents, what the requirements from the parents also. So that's also the school is a right. A school has a right to build up the school or the yeshiva or the cheder, whatever it is, to make takonas who they accept, who they don't accept. And that way the school can run the school the way when they want it. Baruch Hashem, there's plenty of schools, and if a person can't get accepted in one school, he has to go to another school. You know, in Lakewood there was takonas, that they made takonas. It was more with the girls' schools, but with the boys' schools also, that at the end of the day, when there's some people who weren't placed in schools, so there's a HaRabbonim which makes sure that everyone's placed in the school. And in Eretz Yisrael, we have the same thing also. There's a HaRabbonim, which it's more for the girls, that if they couldn't get placed in the school of their choice or when they wanted, so they go to the HaRabbonim and they make a pool of all these girls, and they make each school accept X amount of girls from the pool. But it's a shul, a community wants to Kollel. They have takonas in order to keep the standards which they want to preserve, and it's 100% legitimate. And now a a kila, a city, like Lakewood or Yerushalayim, etc. So the Rabbonim and the kila has to also take care of all the people in the kila to make sure that they have a place where they can study. But each individual school has the right to do to what they feel is necessary to preserve the standards of the school.
Okay.
I want to tell you something. Many years ago, must have been about 25 years ago, when the Russians started coming from Russia. They were coming in mass numbers. If you remember, 5,000-6,000 every month, if not more. And there was an emergency meeting of the Rabbonim and Mechanchen, how we as the Frum community should do to be mekarv them, whatever we can do for schools, etc., etc. So I was sent as the shliach from Rav Yosef to speak at this meeting. And everyone got up with all kinds of takonis. I was much younger then, and the people there were much older than me. And even though I was a shliach from Rav Yosef, I was from the speakers who spoke at the end. And everyone was getting up. We should make takonis, force every school to take in 10% Russians, 5% Russians, this, that, all kinds of takonis. And then I got up, and I said I was sent here, everyone knows, by shlichus from Rav Yosef. And the shlichus from Rav Yosef is that we have to daige for these Russians, who, Baruch Hashem, after 70 years of being in Russia without any, under the communistic regime, which they weren't able to study Torah, we have to take them, we have to go out of our way to be mekarv them. But it doesn't mean that we have to take our schools and lower the levels of our schools. Rav Yosef said, all the Rabbonim here, I should tell you, that you're the Rabbonim, we should open up special schools for the Russians and not force any school to take in girls who won't meet the standards of the schools, to lower the standards of the schools. So people start screaming at me. They start screaming at me. Of older Rabbonim, Rav Yosef never said such a thing. Rav Yosef never said such a thing. How could he say such a thing? I said it's very logical. Rav Yosef is saying. Rav Yosef is saying we have to daige for them, but we don't have to do it on the cheshbon of lowering the level of our school. So 3 Rabbonim, which I 2 of them are still living today, one's not living. They want to mention names. They says no. We went to Rav Yosef and we called Rav Yosef the whole time, and he didn't tell us such a thing. We went from there. I went with 3 Rabbonim straight to Rav Yosef's house, and Rav Yosef took us in, and they start screaming. This guy says he's speaking in the name of Rav Yosef, etc., etc. I said, how you talking? Rav Yosef answered them, word for word what you said, he said. That means what they repeated what I said. That's exactly the shlichus which I said to them. The kehila has to daige that the Russians, we have to take care of them. We have to make schools which are on the level of the Russians, and not to force schools to take in 10% of the girls who are at a much lower level. You can't run a school like that. And we're not mechuyev to lower the level of the schools. So what came out of this meeting? Nothing. Nothing. So Rav Yosef gave over a message that we should set up schools. It was never done. Some private individuals did it, but this was the policy of Rav Yosef. This is the Das Torah which I have from 25 years ago, that an individual kehila does not have to lower their level. But the kehila in general has to make sure that every person has a shul to daven, every person has a school to daven, according to his level and what he should be comfortable with.
I agree. I understand very well what he's saying. I mean, just let me put it into transpose that into like a current American thing. I mean, Harvard takes the best students, right? They have, and there's other schools, but you wouldn't go to Harvard and say, can you, for the sake of affirmative action, take lower kids in who just aren't up to your standards. This would create a big problem and basically erode the entire education system. But the point that you're saying is not a lower level. Does a school have a right to say, for example, there's a bacher who he's a Sephardi, and he's on the same level of learning, but we don't want him because of a Sephardi? What would Rabbi Yashiv say in that case?
Oh, so I want to tell you, it doesn't exist. You know, here in Yisroel, there's a lot of noise that the Sephardim are making, that the Ashkenazi schools discriminate against them. I want to tell you something, and this is a fact which you can check out. It's easier for a Sephardi girl or a Sephardi boy to get into yeshiva that according to the level of this boy or girl than an Ashkenazi boy or girl. What I mean, let me explain. That since the schools are willing to take in 20%, 30% Sephardim, so they have, but unfortunately, the Sepharim's educational system is not as good as the Ashkenazi system. The Baruch Hashem, they're building it up, but there's still a big power between the two systems. And because of that, the Sephardim all want to come to Ashkenazi yeshivas. And Baruch Hashem, Pasha, the Ashkenazi yeshivas, you mentioned before, we learned in the Mir Yeshiva together. I'm still Zoich after 40 years. I still come to the Mir every day. That the Mir Yeshiva will take in a Sephardi Bacher or another yeshiva. If that Bacher meets the level of the standards of the acceptance, then you have to take a Bechini, you have to take this. There's all kinds of things getting into school, just like to get into Harvard. So a Sephardi boy can get into a yeshiva, or a Sephardi girl can get into Ashkenazi school easier than an Ashkenazi boy, because they have the quotas which the Rabbonim made that the yeshivas and the Beisakos are taking Sephardi girls, and to meet the quota they have to take in people on a lower standard than Ashkenazim. And this is a fact.
But Reb Nochum, I'm talking alumnus. Lu Yitzur, you would have a Sephardi boy would apply, and he's on the same level as an Ashkenazi boy, and they say, we won't accept you because you're Sephardi. Would you say that is halachically permitted or no? Just because you're Sephardi, your level... I'm asking alumdish. I'm just asking alumdish. I'm not asking it doesn't... I agree it doesn't exist. Now,
no, that's discrimination. A Jew is a Jew.
Okay, so we're fine on that. Okay.
But again, the school has criteria. They look at the families. They look at the families. They want to know the level. And every school has their criteria. And many of the Sephardims don't meet the criteria of the Ashkenazi schools. They come in from a different school system. But the ones are good.
Reb Nochum, that's not discrimination. If you're saying, regardless of your color, race, creed, you have to have a certain level of scholarship. That's not discrimination. Is if you do have that level, and then it's discrimination. We agree on that, right?
So bring me a bocher who has that level, wasn't accepted in yeshiva, and I'll make sure he gets into the yeshiva. Or a girl who wants to get in the Beis Yaakov, and she meets the level, but the school doesn't want to let her in. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's a whole tumult with people.
I'm not even asking Tom. I'm just asking a lumdish question. You're saying halachically it would be sinas chinam not to accept somebody who's on the same scholarship level because of the way they look. And any time it happens is because there's a difference in scholarship level. That's all.
I don't like the word sinas chinam. I don't like using those words. There's halacha, a yid is a yid, and it makes no difference which kili you come from, you're Hasidish, you're Litvish, you're Svardish, and every yid Maisa has the right to go to any place if he meets the criteria of that place.
Very good. Rabbi, let me go to another topic. In Israel, there's a debate whether they should allow conservative geiros. They should recognize conservative geirim. Now, I can't imagine why we should. I mean, like Rav Moshe writes, they're Rabbonim anishkin Rabbonim, they're Eidim anishkin Eidim, they're Kabbalah Sabal Shabayim, they're Kabbalah Sabal Shabayim. What's your opinion about this?
There's no question about it. Unfortunately, the state of Israel became the spokesman for Jewry around the world. The state of Israel has a lot of political clout. It's a state. It's a government. They have connections all over the world, and they became the spokesman for what's called Yahadus. Now, the state of Israel does not have the right to be more than a spokesman for the Israeli government, which is unfortunately not a government which is run al pi halacha. But since people misunderstand and they think that the state of Israel has authority to say in religious matters also, so the fact that they're giving any credence to conservative, to reform geiros means that it's a default recognition of the conservative and the reform movements, which I always say, and you can quote this in my name, is that it's a different religion. Conservative, what's called conservative Judaism, Reform Judaism, is not Judaism. It's a different religion. is an absolutely different religion which they don't follow the Torah and Ma'aseh of Har Sinai. They're not going to make any changes in the Torah the way it was given over. And the fact that the Israeli government gives them recognition, so people all over the world think that the conservatives in Reform, they represent some kind of a form of Judaism. Now, you have to be very clear that the conservative and a real conservative Jew who was born a Jew, a Reform Jew who was born a Jew, he might not be observant, he's a Jew. We're not talking about that they're not Jewish. We're talking about the conservative form of Reform, or of conservative form. The way they represent Judaism is not Judaism. It's not Yahadis. It's absolutely a different religion. And the fact that the Medina is giving recognition to them, it makes a very, very bad. It's a big mixture for the whole world that people aren't learned. They'll think that the conservative Reform or something. So there's a thing which we have to fight. We have to fight not because there's a big difference whether the government will accept them or not accept them. They don't represent Judaism, but it calls a mixture that people think that the conservative Reform is something. Because that the conservative Reform movement are throwing in millions of dollars in lawyers and all kinds of lobbying and other things here in Israel in order to get recognition. Because they know the recognition of the state of Israel will not make their Geirim any better. It's worthless. Will not make their Kiddushin better. It's worthless. Will not make their way they represent Judaism any better. But the world will give them it'll give them recognition, ki'ilu that they represent a certain stream of Judaism. There's no such thing as a certain stream of Judaism. Judaism is one thing. People who believe in Torah and Sinai, that there's been absolutely no change in the Torah the way we got it in Har Sinai. And this is a big mishal, and we have to fight it out because of the state of Israel representing Ki'ilu they're reckoning Christians that they're Judaism also. Conservative and Reform and Christians all think it's not Judaism. It's something else. Because of that, we have to fight it. We have to fight it. But as far as what they're doing, where they'll make the acts of Kiddushin or Giyur not getting any better, that's not. So we have to, because of that, we have to try to save. And this Rav Yosha was very important, was very makpid about it, that we have to try to save that the image of the state of Israel should be as Jewish as possible, that they only represent real Judaism. Once they start recognizing, so it's going to dilute the whole state of Israel, that it's a less of a Jewish state than it is now. So there's still certain things which they represent. Shabbos, which went down the Latin, and officially the Batadina in charge for getting in Kiddushin, and so it gives some kind of credence that the state of Israel is a little Jewish. But once they can start doing this, the state of Israel, it'll be a civil state like any other state, like Uganda, which they want to go once, and as a Frum Yidden, the Yadis Achredis, Rav Yosef held that we have to put a lot of effort to save the face of the state of Israel, that should have some kind of resemblance to Yiddishkeit.
Okay. Rav Nochum, there was recently a story in Eretz Yisroel that made it into the papers. I asked you because you're an expert on Inyane Geiris, Kiddushin, etc., about a Hafka'as Kiddushin. Could you tell us about it?
Okay, there was a few cases. I'm talking about the most recent one, and so we have to be very, very careful not to misquote. There was a Beis-Din today which I participated in, the Beis-Din of R-Rabbonim, to see how we should deal with the situation. The last case was not a case of Hafka'as Kiddushin. Hafka'as Kiddushin means there was a Kiddushin which took place, and they want to say Mekech Toyes, they want to say that the Kiddushin, the HaRabbonim have the right to Lafkia Kiddushin, which doesn't exist anymore, that right which the HaRabbonim have today. This was a case of they want to invalidate the original Kiddushin because they said there was Psule Edim. Now, everything is a secret. that's in the psak din. That's written in big words that everything is highly secret. No one is allowed to see what they wrote. Okay, there's askanim who know how to do these things. There was 35 pages of documents which they somehow got a hold of, and was brought to the attention of the Beis Din today, which I took part of in, and I can tell you it was first of all, there was contradictions in the protocol. I don't want to go into lumdus over here. There's things over there, the things which the HaRabbonim saw that they want to be matter this lady, that she can get married because her Kiddushin never took place, was ridiculous. It was partially ridiculous, nice. And you're talking about a person who was a Hafka'as ish. She was living for 16 years or 17 years with a husband, and they want to come and say, I only want to go into it, but that's not the main point. The main point is that it's a secret. It's a secret. But why are these HaRabbonim? Why are they afraid to give out what the psak is? But they themselves know that they're going to be attacked, because what they did was not accepted the halachic kabbalas, the Messiahs of what we can paskin, what we can paskin, what we cannot paskin, and therefore they're coming up with all kinds of new things which is scholars awesome in the Torah, and they want to take the Isser Chomer of Eishes Ish, and because of pressure, this is all done because of pressure which they have from women's organizations, from the government, from the Knesset, who wants to undermine the authority of the Beis Din, so they have to come up and show that we're very open-minded, and we have all kinds of so. But this is what Geirim did. When Geirim was matter the mamzer, he took together a basin of 10 HaRabbonim. Everything was a secret. Eventually, a couple of years later, or sometime later, he did give out the psak, but everything was a secret. This is not the derech of the Torah. It's not the derech of the Torah when it comes to dvorim chamurim of Eishes Ish to come and give out secret psakim. And I'm not even going into the fact that we do have information on what exactly that was the psak, which was a joke, which again I'm not going into. But this thing of a secret thing recently in America, the same thing took place. That there's a certain HaRav, who I'm very close with. I called him up and asked him on basis of what do you matter this Eishes Ish, and he told me I'm writing a tshuva. When will I get the tshuva? In a couple of weeks the tshuva will be ready. The tshuva, he wrote the tshuva after he was matter. It's already 2 years afterwards. I didn't see the tshuva. No one saw the tshuva. There was no Beis Din. There's nothing in writing. But he went. This is going to cause such a Hafka'as in the whole world that a person can be matter in Eishes Ish. He can be matter in Eishes Ish, and it's a secret. It's a secret. Why I'm writing a tshuva? Why I wrote a tshuva? It's a secret. You can't read. Eishes Ish is fire. We're playing with Eishes Ish, and you want to learn yeshiva. But today, Eishes Ish became nothing. This is a very, very terrible trend. It started in America 2 years ago. So I'm saying, besides the fact that the halachic, according to what we know, that the halachic principles of being matter was absolutely had no halachic basic whatsoever. But it's even more serious. Giving out secret psakim. What's the secret? What are you afraid of? I'll tell you what you're afraid of. A spokesman for the rabbinate. It wasn't a spokesman, a person who was not based in. He's retired now, and they interviewed him in the media here today, and this was someone told me, and he says that the reason why why he supports this based in who did not give out the psak, because they're afraid of the greatest HaRabbonim. They will come and attack him and show that the heter is worthless. So mainly they don't give it out.
Right.
So this is a thing which has to be stopped. If someone gives a psak, he has to be comfortable with the psak, not to give out a psak and other things. Also, you call up a rabbi, I'll give you a psak, but don't give out my name. What do you mean don't give out your name? You stand behind your psak, you don't stand behind your psak.
I agree with you. I'll tell you something, Nochum, personally here on the program, when people leave all these messages anonymously, if you don't have the courage to put your name on it, it doesn't mean anything. It has no value. It has no integrity.
No, it's less than that. You mentioned this. I mean, someone here recently put out a kuntris about Gittin, which he claimed that there was problems with a lot of Gittin, which were being done by the Rabbanut. There could be some of the things he said were right, some of the things he said were wrong. It has to be examined. But he didn't put his name on it. So I met this person. And he told me that it's a person which I know casually, and I bumped into him, and he said, "Did you see the kuntris?" I said, "I saw the kuntris." That you put out the kuntris? He says, "Yes." I said, "I'm telling you, your kuntris is not more than a patchkavila. If you put things out without your name, you say it's worthless. I say it's worse than it's less than worthless because it's a patchkavila, and the patchkavila has no worth. If you're not strong enough and proud enough, and that you trust your own psak, then don't give a psak. But don't give out patchkavilas. Don't give out a kuntris that you're afraid to put your name on it." The same thing that people leave you anonymous messages on the telephone. It's the telephone's not a patchkavila, but if you're giving something out in writing, it's called a patchkavila. I don't know if your listeners know what a patchkavila is. Your English is better than mine. I don't know if there's a way even to translate a patchkavila into English, but maybe you can help me out what a patchkavila is called in English.
We all understand. From Nochum, thank you as always. It's an honor to have you on to tell us over the Das of Rebbe Yashiv. It's an honor having you with us.
Yeah, and the Das of Yashiv is the Das Torah for everyone. It's only the Das of Yashiv. It's not a Das Yochid. Everyone who knew Rebbe Yashiv and anyone who didn't know Rebbe Yashiv, heard of Rebbe Yashiv, anyone that has any respect for Torah and Halacha knows that this door of Yashiv was the Pesach Achron, and the previous door of Moshe was the Pesach Achron, and the door before that Chaim Moiser was the Pesach Achron. Every door, Kosh Baruch had Rachmanis, and he was in Mashtil Maisa, and every door he implanted a person who's the known Gadol Ador, and Baruch Hashem Pashad, Kehem Chayenu V'Echemenu V'Oyim Anu Neilech.
Amen. Thank you very much, Geirim Nochum.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Rabbi Isaac Dweck, who was born in Aleppo, Syria. He speaks Arabic. He was the Rav in Deal for 37 years. He now has a Kollel called R HaBitachon. He's recently published a book from Art Scroll called The Life of Bitachon. Welcome, Rabbi Dweck.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Dweck, we've all heard about the edict, the Moidah Rabba L'Raisa, that the Syrian community put into force sometime in, I believe, the 1930s. And we would like you to tell us a little bit about it, your experiences, and we'll ask you some halachic shilos about it as well. But why don't you tell our audience about the takana, the edict that was established?
I have in front of me a copy, the original handwriting of Rabbi Jacob Kassin, Alav Shalom, that he wrote in 1935. Moidah Rabba L'Raisa, not to be mekabel any Geirim. And this edict was first made in Argentina by Rabbi Shaul Sitton in 1910, and it was followed by Rabbi Kassin in Brooklyn, New York in 1935. It was emphasized again by Rabbi Matluv Abadi. It was a Choshev Talmid Chacham in 1946. And occasionally, every bunch of years, we re-sign it and recommit ourselves to it, as we did in 1984, and I think again in 2008, which means that all the HaRabbonim of the many Syrian congregations sign it, and it says that we don't accept Geirim, and that we would not give them aliyahs, and we would not accept their children in our schools. And the takana has held now from 1935 to now, and it's been a very strong takana, and most people in the community consider it a pillar of the existence of the Syrian community, that we do not have the problem of intermarriage, almost none. There have been some cases, there have been some situations, but the takana is held.
Now, Rabbi Dweck, when you say that you don't accept them and their children, they don't get an aliyah, and they won't accept them to the schools, would you invite them to a simcha? Could they come to your bar mitzvah, to a chasana, nichum avelim? Do they attend your simchas? Like, how strong is this edict?
Well, there is I have in front of me the edict, to emphasize the edict of 1935 that was written by Rabbi Abadi and signed by Rabbi Kass in 1946, and says specifically what is allowed, what's not allowed. It says even if another community accepted them, they're not accepted, and it says we're not allowed to accept any of the I'm reading from the edict. We don't accept the converts into the synagogue, nor rent them the place for marital ceremonies, or to allow them in any of the services. Now it says also the rabbi shall not officiate at any wedding of these converts, and the committee of the synagogue shall not honor them, nor give them the privilege of aliyah to the Torah. Also no cease for the high holidays. Even their wives shall not be privileged to sit with the ladies in the synagogue. In their passing away, I'm reading from the edict, in the passing away from their lives on this earth, they shall not be accepted for burial in our cemetery known as Redford Tzedek, a place which is reserved for the holy congregation. So this is a takana. Right against parties or nothing, it doesn't say. But once a person is not allowed in the shul and not allowed to be buried in the cemetery, they generally speaking, they would not be they would not be coming.
So they're not invited to parties. They don't go to chasanas, but so it's a Geirim it's a Geirim, I guess. It's like right. Would that be? Yeah. It's like the Hager and Shilam Dalet. It's very similar to a Geirim. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, as a Rav, did you? You were 37 years the Rav in Deal. Did you ever have the incidents of encountering this edict and of people who violated it?
Oh yes, I have, and had a fellow that came from England. His last name I'm not going to mention, but there are certain last names in the Syrian community that are known to be Kohanim. So he came. He said he wants to move to Deal, and his wife was converted in the Bezdin in London. I said, but you're a Kohen. A Kohen can't marry a Giyur, and besides that, we don't accept Geirim. I recommend you don't move to Deal. And so he was converted probably by reform. Nonetheless, a few years later, he moved to Deal, and his daughter started coming to shul. They were barred from the shul, and he would call me 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, threatening my life. And then he went to Bezdin in Borough Park and told him he's not a Kohen. And I know they had a dinner in his honor, so he must have made a big donation. I'm not going to mention which Bezdin, very famous Bezdin. And so I asked the Bezdin, how could you paskin on a person with a Syrian last name without checking with us? And they said that he showed us a picture of the matzeva of his father, and he's not a Kohen. So he had told me that he is a Kohen. And the name is a Bavustik, I don't want to mention the name, but it's a Bavustik Kohen name for Deiris in the Syrian community. The Chidah mentions the name of Kohanim from Aleppo. And so they said, Sharasa Matzeva. So his father was buried in London. I sent the Rav of London, Rabbi David, to go get look at the Matzeva. And he sent me a picture. I have a picture on file where the fellow actually took off HaKayin from his father's Matzeva. You see that the name are not symmetrical. He took off HaKayin. And he got him to accept the Geiris. Then he went to another Bezdin and he claimed there wasn't really a Geiris. But none of this worked. And Lamaisa, his children were not accepted in the Kilo. That's one situation.
Were they accepted in the schools?
No.
Did they have to, in the end, move out? Did they move out of Deal?
I believe so. Yes.
So, Rabbi Dweck, let me ask you, and I don't want to, I'm only talking in learning here, not in, but this is what I would ask a Rav. It says 36 times in the Torah, some form of a Vihavtem es Hager. V'oyev ger losseis lelechem v'simla Vihavtem es Hager kisem Geirim ha'yisem beresh Mitzrayim. It talks about being Mitzayer a ger, leisate mishpat ger yasev almana. I think it's the most quoted mitzvah and isser in the Torah, right? Ahavas a ger and to be Mitzayer a ger. What did the great Rabbi Kassin do when they put this edict into place? You'd struggle to say it's not being Mitzayer a ger by not letting them into your schools, or it's considered a Havas a ger. How do you halachically? Would Rabbi Kassin deal with that?
It's an excellent kasha, and I anticipated your question. So before Rabbi Kassin made this takana, 1910 was made by Rabbi Dabach in the Bach Siton in Argentina. So I have a booklet that I got from Argentina when I visited the Syrian community there years back. And this was that the original takana was accepted and approved by Rabbi Yaakov Meir, the chief rabbi of Israel, in the year Tafrei Sadiches, and Rabbi Cook, at the time the chief rabbis, and the Bezdin of Yerushalayim, of Rav Zelek Bengis and Rav David Jungreis. I'm looking at the booklet that I got from Dushinsky.
The Badatz is Bezdin. Yes,
that's right, and Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, and the various Batadim Esfardim in Aleppo and in Yerushalayim. This goes back. This is the booklet that I have. So what it does say there is that if they would go to the Beis Din HaGadol in Yerushalayim, they could have a Geiris. So they're not banning Geirim completely, but there was a loophole that you could do it. And there were some exceptions over the years, but very, very few, and it took years and years of meetings and negotiations to accept a few. So it's not an absolute, but it's nearly an absolute.
But what do they do with the isser of being Mitzayer a ger? Like if a ger comes, he wants to be accepted, we don't let him in, it's an isser daraisa. So how do we make a takana? Is it mastal mashikasav v'Torah? Could it even take effect?
Well, again, we're talking about the Gedolim that said that the Migdar Milsi allowed to. And they say that in Argentina it was a major problem, that the Geirim were not sincere. And they did say in their in one of the letters that if there is a way to be Mekabel Ger, you just want to make sure you do it right. You're not being Mitzayer Ger. You're just making a getter to make sure that it's that it's real Geris. That what happens, what it says in one of the letters is that they would go to any three Hadyatas and be Megayer in them. And so it's not saying that they're not going to accept Gerim completely, but they're making it very difficult.
So, Rabbi Dweck, if somebody married a Giyuris and they lived in Phoenix or someplace else, and he lived the life, he became a Rosh Kollel, and he moved to Deal, would his children be allowed into the yeshivas and shoals?
Probably not. And
so why isn't that being Mitzayer Ger? It clearly was a proper Geiris. It wasn't done for marriage. It happened generationally. So is it a getter maybe of Eis Laseis Lashem Heiferu Terasecha that they just said, look, we have to do this to be able, it's true, it's a very important, but without it, our community could face, intermarriage in America now is 50%. What is the intermarriage by the Sfardim?
By Syrian Sfardim, almost none. I don't think it approaches 1%. And the idea is a Migdar Milsa, and it's as you say, it's Eis Laseis Lashem, and you're not absolutely forbidding every person. And again, if we see all the Batei Dinim that approved it, I would not be worried about it. When we signed it and reaffirmed it again and again, and each time there was a debate like that there got to be some kind of an opening. But we have plenty of Paiskim to depend on, and I guess it's Eis Laseis Lashem.
It's interesting. I guess Rabbi Akiva was a Ben Geirim. We just celebrated Shavuos. Rus Hamayavia was but I guess at that time they didn't have 50% intermarriage either. Is that fair to say?
Right. Well, I mean, we had a meeting once at the Rabbinical Council with Rabbi Kasson, alav hashalom, and the fellow came, a very big Giyur from out of town, who was married out of town, and he wanted to be accepted. And Rabbi Kasson told him, "You're like cancer in our community. We got to cut you off." And the fellow sent a lawyer's letter suing the Rabbinical Council. This goes back probably to 1976 or so. And so what I did at the time is that we put up the letter of the lawsuit on the wall of the shul. We spoke about it Shavuos time, and they told him, even if you were Rus, we would not accept you. That this is the Bitachon of the Kehillah. And the fellow moved out. He bought a house in Deal and he sold it and moved out.
Now, is it true that I've heard that Rabbi Kasson himself had a daughter who married a ger, and he wouldn't accept his own daughter back in?
Well, yeah, a granddaughter. Yeah, he was very, very strong on his own grandchild. Yeah.
And he didn't. There was no favoritism. There was no bending of the rules.
He was very extreme. That's his son. It was the father of this girl. He would not accept her. Yeah.
And would you say, Rabbi Dweck, that is this the reason why the Syrian community has stayed so strong, this takana?
Most people in the community feel that way. They feel it saved the community. And I know there is a museum of Syrian culture in Lakewood, was run by Mr. Joe Sitt, who I went with to Syria in 2008, and they're doing tremendous research on all the papers regarding this takana, and it's felt that it's a mainstay of the community.
Is there anything else about this, Rabbi Dweck, that you would like to share with us? Any thoughts?
One thing is this wouldn't work in most other communities because it has to do with the cohesion and the great pride Syrians have in their community. Rav Avadia asked me once, he says, the people coming to him, they want to be accepted in Geirim. What's the big deal? Let them go live somewhere else. So, but I explained to Rav Avadia the tremendous desire to be part of the community, the cohesion and the pride of being part of the Syrian community. It's just miraculous almost. I've been to Argentina, where there's a great Syrian community, a very large one. In Mexico, where there's a very large Syrian community. In Panama and Brazil. And somehow the Syrians stick together. Now, in the Middle East, there must have been how many cities of Sephardim in the Middle East, but you don't find Moroccans staying all together or Algerians or wherever, but somehow the Syrian Jew felt a certain pride in being a Syrian, and they usually refer to ourselves as a very great community, and not being accepted in the community is like a terrible sentence, and as a result, it could be kept. But in another community, if a person says, listen, they don't want to give me an aliyah in this shul, I'm going to make a donation to the next shul. So it speaks a lot about the Syrian community and how it is in Latin America and in South America, the crux and the main structure of the communities, even for Ashkenazis, is the Syrians. In Mexico, they have, 20 Kollel in Mexico City or more. And it's something special, something wonderful.
So, Rabbi Dweck, in a Yiddishkeit, in a Judaism which is so vociferous, so broken into pieces. I mean, how many yeshivas, Hasidus, have the fighting? How has the Syrian community? What is the source of the pride? And how has it stuck together? How has it avoided the Jewish disease of machlekes? We just passed Parshas Parah. It's not the chas v'shalom. I don't want to say a Jewish disease, a worldwide disease. I don't want to chas v'shalom say. What is the source of the pride of the Syrians? I believe that they say there's a shul in Aleppo where you were born that they say David HaMelech founded. But what is the source of the pride, and how has it avoided machlekes? What can we Ashkenazim or other Sephardim learn? Something echad, echad is big. What can we learn from the Syrians?
I think it's miraculous. I've spoken about it. I'm trying to figure it out. I have a tremendous pride in being part of the Syrian community. I go back to Aleppo. I went back twice. And I looked at the house where I was born. My grandfather was a Rav there, and a tremendous pride. And I really, it's hard for me to understand exactly. And we have the same foods and the same tunes, but that other people have also. It's just as they call the city Ir Shel Chachamim V'Seifrim. I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but I'll tell you a little story. I had a meeting with Menachem Begin when he was a prime minister in his office with my brother. At the time, there were Syrians coming from Aleppo to Israel. And we pleaded with Prime Minister Begin to put him in one place in Israel. We told him that we have a community in Brooklyn, we have a community all over the world. In Israel, there is no Syrian community. There's no reason for that. We want to make a Kiryat Aram Tzova, like you have a curious sounds and curious bells. And Menachem Begin says, we don't believe it. He was very courteous and very nice, and my brother gave him a bracha, put on a yarmulke on his head. But he said, we don't believe in ethnic minorities. We believe in breaking up communities. Otherwise, you're not going to have a state of Israel. We disagreed with him strongly, and we told him that if they're together, they would keep their identity, and the community would support him. It'd be good for the Medina. But the Menachem Begin was not buying. Very courteous, very nice. We sat in his office for 45 minutes. But it's this cohesion that keeps the benhagim, that keeps the stock out of the community. There was such a thing. My great uncle, Rabbi Yaakov Dweck, made a Geirim in Aleppo about Shmir Shabbos. And as a result, from 1907 until they left Aleppo, there was no Chilul Shabbos in Aleppo. They said anybody who doesn't keep Shabbos would not be buried in the cemetery. It's printed in the Sefer Derech Emunah. They have it signed by the 40 rabbis of Aleppo. When I get on Aliyah, and they kept Shabbos, but there's that cohesion. To answer what is the secret to the Syrian community is hard to know, and it's something that's in the blood and the bones of the community.
Do they support each other in tzedakah financially in a way? Does the pride manifest itself in other ways besides?
In every way, there's a support system because everybody's everybody else's cousin. And they have a tremendous pride in being who they are, and there's a tremendous closeness. That's not to say there's no machlokes. It says, but to say that there's a cohesion and a pride that you don't see in other places.
One last question: is it true that I read that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef actually came to plead with Rabbi Kassin on behalf of the Giyuris? Yes. And Rabbi Kassin said no to Chacham Ovadia.
Yes.
It's a true story.
Yeah, Rabbi Ovadia stayed in my house at that time, yes.
And tell us the story.
Well, there was a woman who was Geirim out of town, and her children went to yeshivas. And as a result, now she got engaged to somebody in Deal, and Rabbi Ovadia wanted that she should be accepted, and he actually went to the rabbinical council, and they were very strong. Rabbi Ovadia told me he didn't sleep all night that night after that meeting. But
I guess he wasn't used to hearing the word no.
He said he hasn't seen such kanos by Sfardim. He seems like kanos by Ashkenazim, but Rabbi Ovadia was even if there was a takon of a bezdin, his bezdin is bigger than any other bezdin, but they said no, and years later, this Giyur was accepted. The HaRabbonim did accept her. Mm-hmm. The children, that is not the original one, and because Rabbi Ovadia, I believe, did the Giyur again. But it took years of the idea is even if you're going to make an exception, they can't make it easy.
Well, we've also spoken about here in the program many times that the concept of Yiftach B'Shmari Kishmul B'Dairei goes on geography as well. So Rabbi Ovadia was certainly the greatest Paisik we've seen in Sfardim, certainly, maybe in hundreds, maybe since the Rambam. but he didn't realize that in America he wasn't aware of the 50% intermarriage rate. In Eretz Yisrael, there's a low single digits intermarriage rate. So
he's not certainly the biggest, basically, since the Rambam, you're making him bigger than the Shulchan Aruch. But
I'm saying by the. Oh, but you're right. I take yes, the Beis Yosef. Yeah.
Right. But no question, the Gadlus Rav Avadia was not from our generation. He came to my house once a year for 19 years, and how humble he was, and how pleasant to speak to, and his sense of humor is tremendous.
What about his hasmada?
His hasmada is unbelievable. I wrote about it in my book. His hasmada was like he always learned. He was. I went with him once. I was in his home. We davened in his home, and he was. It was Birkas Alonis time, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So they asked me, "You want to go with the Rav in his car to Birkas Alonis?" Says, "My pleasure." So I know Birkas Alonis, according to Mekabolim, is you're masakin the nitzesis in the trees, and it's a big thing. The Kafachayim goes as they write us to say it's also to do it on Shabbos because you're boirer. And Mekabolim have tefillas, and you're doing tremendous takonos. I said I'm going to go to Rav Avadia to see how he does the Birkas Alonis. I went with him in his limousine. We got to the Birkas Alonis. It took him 30 seconds back into the car, back to learn.
Wow.
That's one story. I'll tell you one other. Every Lag Ba'omer, I go to Israel, and usually has a Suda at the end of the day in his house. He invites big Geirim. For some reason, he used to invite me also. So once we were there, we sang, and the Rav drank wine. He was very happy. We left at 11:30 at night, and I forgot a sefer in his house. I went back, knocked on the door after 11:30. I figured his daughter-in-law, where he lives, would open the door for me. They opened the door. The Rav is sitting and learning with the Chavrusa. 11:30 at night, after a Suda, we're drinking and singing. That's his hasmada. He ran all the politics and Shas and everything else, Ben Hasdarim, everything else, back to learning. And every year he would give me a sefer he wrote, inscribed for what he accomplished in his learning and his doing. And once I was in Israel in the winter, so I came to visit the Rebbetzin with my wife. I told her we were just in Tveria. Tveria is beautiful. She says, Tagid Lacham Ovadia, tell him to go to Tveria. So the Rebbetzin told me. He was so approachable. Who am I to tell him what to do? I said, Tveria is beautiful. Why don't you go to Tveria? He says, I have to learn. So I told him he could learn in Tveria. So he says to me, I don't have my library over there. So I told him that the Chidah wrote the Sefer Shem HaGdolim in 30 days when he was in quarantine. He wrote about all that's wrong without a library. So that was my... he didn't go on vacation. Whenever he came to deal, he loved to come and to speak, but always learning. Yom Balayla.
So, Rabbi Dweck, is it fair to say, is the Sephardic community changing? My mother, for I think 20 years, maybe 30 years, taught at Magen David. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to somebody who grew up in Borough Park and Flatbush to be quite secular. Mm-hmm. And now you see so many myriads of Sephardic and Galite who look like they just walked right out of the biggest yeshivas in the world. Is the community in America changing?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very happy to see that. America was not Aleppo. I came from Aleppo in 1960, and America was not Aleppo. It was not on the same level of Frumkeit, and it's not the same level of Shmir Shabbos. But the whole world is changing. It's not just the Syrian community. If you look at the Smicha picture of Ramoshe's Shir, he was the only one who had a beard. And there's a picture of the Rav Avadia, he was the only one who had a beard. We're talking the 1950. And Baruch Hashem, today the whole world is changing, and the community is definitely changing. But the beautiful part about the community is the ones, the black hats so-called, and the white hats, and the Fruma and the Freya, all have a deep kesher, and generally speaking, they're all related. And
they were able to stick together. It didn't break the achdus, the singularity of the community.
Right. I was warned when I became a Rav and Deal at the age of 25. You're going to break the community. You want to become a black hat, or not? You're going to break the unity of the community. And Baruch Hashem, the unity was not broken. We opened Kollel.
And how do you have black hats and no hats and white hats sitting together? Why doesn't judgmentalism cause friction?
There is friction. There is machlekes, but generally speaking, the blood is thicker than water. And the relationship and the love of the ways in the community and the pride in the community keeps us together.
Rabbi Dweck, it was an honor having you on with us, and I think certainly the hava and the achdus that the Syrian community has, and the lack of intermarriage could certainly be a learning, a point of study and learning for all of us. Thank you very much for your time.
Keep up your good work.
Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us from Mexico City, and this is our program. We've done, hundreds, maybe 170 different programs. First time we've had a Rav from Mexico, Rabbi Yitzhak Fuchs. He's originally from Borough Park. He learned in Kloisenberg by the Kloisenberger Rebbe in Union City, in Sanz, the Kloisenberger Rav. He has a shul in Mexico and a cheder in Mexico called Avnei Pas. Welcome, Rabbi Fuchs. You're involved with Geiris in Mexico, and I understand that the community there, like the Sephardim, like the Syrian community here in New York, like many communities in Argentina, are reluctant to accept Geirim. And tell us a little bit about that.
And they don't just accept Geirim. They just, even though it's the best Geirim, they wouldn't accept them. Period. They just don't accept Geirim. They never accepted Geirim. Some people went even in depression because they became very depressed because of that. And so I figured, it would be, if I'm in Mexico already, let me do something creative. Let me do something that I could take along with me.
But do you understand, Rabbi Fuchs, why the community doesn't want to accept Geirim? It's not out of maliciousness.
No, it's not. It's not of maliciousness, and it's not of kindness. It's not of both. It's not kindness, and it's not. They're like in the middle. They're trapped.
Well, they want to preserve. They don't want to have intermarriage. They want to prevent intermarriage.
But if they want to prevent intermarriage, they should be more careful. That's about it. You take in the bottom line. It says 26 times or 36 times. It says in the Torah. It says Vihavtem again. So like you're erasing Shabbos, or you're erasing the mitzvah from the Torah. So even though it's hard for them, I understand, but they should make exceptions. They should make. Depends who wants to be a guest. They should be more choiker, more investigating, more. So listen, but I'm not angry at them because they have their rabbis and they do whatever they're taught to do, and I don't have any obligation to them. I'm Ashkenazi. A Chusset, my Rebbe is supporting me 100%, and other tzaddikim also in Israel are supporting me, and they gave me the green light to do it. And they say if it was put in, it says in the Torah that Avram Avinu made Gerut, v'hanefesh asher osi b'chorim. So they don't put anything, and it is not a single word in the single letter in the Torah that you shouldn't learn from it. So you should learn from it that yes, it's a mitzvah to help them, but it's also in the other's hand it's a big responsibility to help them too. I don't say I see the Parshas also. I'm with those Geirim day and night. They live here. Some live in the building. I have 18 rooms for Knesset Orchem over here. If somebody wants to come in, he could come in with his family. And then, of course, at the beginning, I pushed them away. And by the way, I also closed down a few churches from Messianic Jews There was opened a few of them, and I closed them down because I showed them the right way and I spoke to them. And also, I pushed them in. A lot of people, they come over here. Most of them, like 80%, goes to Bnei Noach. I pushed them into Bnei Noach. I explained them that Hashem didn't ask you to be Jewish. Hashem didn't ask you to do anything. To do the mitzvahs was for the Jewish people. The Torah is for the Jewish people, not for the Gentiles. So I'm trying to explain to them, and some of them, most of them go away, but there's another very small percentage, maybe 7%, that they come back. And they want to, sometimes I have with Messiah's neighbors, they come from other states, from Mexico, and they live very poorly in very bad situation.
What would inspire a Mexican person from some town in Chiapas to come to be Megayer? Like, where does it come, this Cyrus, from?
It comes from, usually those people are investigating. People that are ignorant, like most Catholic or Christians, they don't know even what's Christian. They don't know even what Catholics are. They just follow like a cow, just his father. But some people are investigating. They want to make sure that it's really right. And when they see a lot of holes in the religion, and they see that it doesn't make sense, all the things what they teach them, and they look into the Torah and they see it's contradicting with the Bible, with their Bible, the New Testament. So then they start to investigate more. And they want to jump on the wagon what's right. And also before Mashiach's time, Maalot Hashem Dayu, they're gonna. It says like that. That's right. The prophets.
Right. So, what inspired you to do this?
Me inspired just I had always a feeling for Geirim. That's why my Rebbe taught us all the time. Vihavtem is Hager, that he's leaving everything behind, and he doesn't have anything, and his family, his everything. He's starting like a new one, and that's what the rabbis are teaching us, that we have to love them. It's a mitzvah, Vihavtem l'reich kamochu, and another mitzvah, Vihavtem is Hager.
Rabbi Fuchs, is it possible that in Mexico the reason there's Cyrus Figueres is because the Mexicans see the Jews as like very almost magically successful people, and they think that if they become Jewish, something like very positive will happen in their lives?
Yeah, it's a possibility, and I have to investigate that it's not because they're not coming in because of that. That's also a possibility. Yeah, they're coming for money. For a woman to marry somebody, of course I have to. I have every time I have questions like that. That my Jewish guy calls me up. His wife is a goy, and he wants to make gerut. Of course, I'm not accepting them. It's not that kind of business.
What inspired you to do this? It's like amazing.
I'm dressed like a Hasidic Yid. So if you go out, any place you go out, they start talking to you. And they start talking to you, and then it goes into a harder conversations, and that's why that's part of where I am, and it's an issue that I like to talk about. Like, let's say I'm sitting on a plane, and the guy's a Christian and starts talking to me. I made already thousands and thousands of people apikorsum in Christianity.
How do you do it? Could you tell me how you do it? Like, give me an example.
I start speaking to him. He starts speaking to me. I'm not going over to anybody to just harass him. It doesn't go. But if I have a person sees me dressed like a Jewish person, he starts talking to me and starts to give me his education and his. Some people they know, like Yeshayahu 53. You know, they know a little bit what they teach them in church, and then I explain them. Let's learn it together. Let's see how it goes. Let's see if it's Jesus or it's somebody else. Maybe it's going to be you by the end of the conversation. So it's you know, and then they see that if you learn it the right way, you see it has nothing to do with Jesus. And all of them, it's so easy, it's so obvious, but you have to be really, really ignorant to not see it. So that's it's like a hobby also, that kind when I'm you know, but on the other side it's very it's a big responsibility. I was many times in Mexico City with my Geirim, and they didn't want to let them into Bet Knesset. They just told me no. They won't come in.
Why is that? Explain that to me.
They don't want to. One is afraid from the other one. If he's going to let me know, maybe the Rav is going to be angry at him. Maybe they're going to take away some benefits. That's how it looks to me. Even though the best one would say, okay, you hear it, but don't bring them anymore. Sometimes I come into a place and there's a minion, and all of a sudden there's no minion. And I ask them why there's no minion. They say because you're here with the Fevra, you know. So everybody runs away from them. Okay. So, but I don't get encouraged anything. Other. This gives me that you have to do more for them. And usually my people over here, they don't suffer anything because they have everything over here. They don't have to go any place. We have even a matzah bakery for Pesach. We have everything. We don't need anything from anybody.
So you were in the Sire to make Geirim, and how many Geirim have you made?
Like 70.
Wow. Wow.
So,
and your wife has to do all the cooking, right?
My wife and her staff.
I hear.
She's not doing it by herself. She always has in the kitchen helpers.
Right.
From the community. It's just the beginning, and Baruch Hashem, I see a lot of siyata d'shmaya, that people came in, and you know, you see children, yingelach, you know, that are so good and so, you know, it's like they say, Oman Yeheshemei Rabbo, and all, you know, it's not very serious, very, very serious. I mean, a lot of people come here and they get very excited because they see from one side Goyim wants to be Yidden, and from the other side Yidden they want to be Goyim. So they have a lot of physical over here. Somebody like came last time told me that they have to bring in the whole border park. They have to bring in for Shabbos. They should learn how to be, what kind of privilege we have. That we are Jewish people and we don't have to go through Gerut and all of that, and how happy they are, and how sad some of our people that they was born Jewish. That's the Mr. Haskell that actually I want people should learn from this place.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Fuchs. It's an honor to have you on with us. Okay.
You should be matzliach whatever you do, and you should be able to mekadosh Shem Shemaim.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
Bye-bye. And this is the answers to last week's halacha riddle. We had many, many responses, probably more than 100, and we've chosen sort of like a raffle of those who we believe got the correct responses.
Hi, Shalom, Reb David. This is Michael Stein calling from Baltimore. I was just calling to answer last week's riddles. First question you asked was about why we do make a bracha on being mafresh truma, even though you're able to do it by machshava, as opposed to bittul, which we know that you don't make a bracha since you do it by machshava. I think the difference might lie in that when it comes to truma, really there's a chiyuv to be mafresh truma, and that really should be a ma'aseh, except that the Torah is mechadesh that one is able to do it b'machshava. So really, what I'm doing is an act of the Torah is mechadesh that one's able to do the hafrashas truma. Just using one's machshava, but really it is an act. Effectively, its outcome is that it's an act of hafrashas truma. The same question about Korach, where it says, "Bezos teidun ki Hashem shalachani," and how is that? Isn't that a stira to the Ramav? What the Ramav says, that Kollel Yisroel never believed in Moshe Rabbeinu because of the nisim that he performed. I think the Meforshim generally explain, and I think I saw the Tzitz Eliezer explains this, and some of the Meforshim also say the same thing, that Kollel Yisroel actually didn't suspect Moshe Rabbeinu of making everything up. What they did think was occurring at that point was that Kodesh Baruch Hu had given Moshe the option, or was actually only giving Moshe the leadership and Aaron the kahuna because of the covenant of Moshe, not because they be'etzem. Not because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'etzim wanted as part of giving the Torah. So that is something that could change, and he gave Moshe Rabbeinu the option of selecting who could be the Kohen Gadol, and that's what they believed was occurring, and they thought that since Moshe Rabbeinu was given the option, it was only fair that he choose in a way that was fair to others, and that was what he was saying. B'zois teidun ki Hashem shalachtani, that this was not a decision given to me by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but this is something HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me to do, because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted. Thank you very much for your show. Enjoy it every week.